All right, here we go. All right, folks, welcome to TWiP episode 511. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. We are going to be starting the show right now. This show is all about Rockstar Trainers of Photography. All that magic starts now. This is TWiP. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Joining me today to talk about the Rockstar Trainers of Photography are Mr. Chris Colvin and Christopher Berry. Hey, guys, how you doing?
Hey, Frederick, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. This is good. This is going to be a good show. I think this is a really good topic to tackle. Before we do that, let's do some quick introductions. Craig Colvin, what's going on with you, man? What's happening in the world of your magical photography?
Things are going great. I'm just going to different places and making things happen.
And making images happen, I hope, right?
Making images happen. Now, I've been I had a little hiatus from shooting, but getting back into it. And, partly, I was in a creative rut, and the recent TWiP episode helped me get out of that rut. So
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about right there. Well, welcome back, man. Welcome back to the show. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to be here.
All right. And Mr. Chris Berry, what is going on with you, man?
Frederick.
You're running the world. Are you down in Mexico right now?
I'm back. I literally got home, shaved, showered, and prepped to go live with you guys. But yep, I was on the beach, and now I'm in my place. So I'm
Awesome.
feeling good, feeling nice and relaxed.
Awesome. Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. This is actually going to be a really good show. I'm excited. So before we do that, like I said, the topic of this show is Rockstar Trainers of Photography. But before we do that, there's some news to talk about. A couple of news stories that I want to cover that happened this past week in photography, maybe a little bit before. One of the stories is Adobe is in the news again. We talked about Adobe, I think, in last week's show. And the topic was around them raising their prices for the Creative Cloud service. And I guess it paid off because this week's news is Adobe has posted record revenue again. So I think they posted 2.08 billion in Q1 of 2018.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
yeah, that's crazy. I want to get both of you guys to chime in because you kind of approach this from two sides of it. I think you're both using the Creative Cloud, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
you are.
I use the full cloud,
The
not
full
just the
cloud, right? So, Craig, why don't we start with
right.
you, man? What do you? So this twofold question. So Adobe
I use it a little.
Adobe posting revenue, these crazy revenue numbers, and then them increasing the prices. Does any of this sway you to does this make you want to stay with Creative Cloud or leave it?
Well, the problem is there's not a whole lot of options. Right, they're the 500-pound gorilla. They own so much market share. They have the best tools. Right, there are some others that are trying to compete with them, but they're all of them just aren't quite there yet in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna stick with them, and you know, not I don't enjoy paying more for it, but
So you're basically gonna stick around until you find something better, and then you're gonna bounce, or
that's
do
right.
you? Oh, really?
Well,
So it's not like you're.
if I could find something better, yes. I mean, I
So
have a lot invested in Photoshop, right?
yeah.
It has
It's
a
a lot of muscle memory in
huge
there.
learning curve, and right, something new, I'm going to have to go through that learning curve again.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be as bad this time because I think a lot of it translates.
Right.
But yeah, it's just a matter of sticking with it. It is. I love the tools, right?
Yeah.
They do a good job.
Yeah,
They
and if
do
they're
what I
doing
need.
if they're doing the job and they allow you to create the work that you want to create, then why bounce, right? I don't know.
Right.
Chris Berry, what about you, man? Does any of this sway you from sticking with the Creative Cloud, or are you like Chris, or
Mm,
like
I'm all over the place.
yeah,
I'm all over the place. I think the cloud is obviously where we're going because the numbers don't lie.
mm-hmm,
But I think for me, I keep thinking about how big of a service it is for creators who don't have a brick and mortar and who travel and who need to have some type of security for their files, and to be able to go from an iPhone to an iPad to a MacBook or to whatever their mobile device is, to be able to have some type of seamless integration of their files. And I think it's super convenient, and I think I'll probably begin to use it more once I travel a lot more and do more mobile editing and such. I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at Adobe, and they are masters at making the service sticky. In fact, I'm taking notes from them on how to make subscriptions, how to add so much value that it makes it hard to leave a service. And I think Adobe has been masterful at that. I mean, they took their pains and all the negative press when they switched to the subscription model, and now people are kind of getting used to it and factoring in that monthly fee into their overall expenses, and or increasing their fee to cover that. So
Right.
it's working in that respect. But yeah, the tools that Adobe makes are world class, obviously.
Absolutely.
So, and they've been world class, I think, since as long as I can remember. Since as long as I've been in this game, it's been Adobe when you think graphic stuff, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. So I wonder, one of the things that I've been talking about for years is, I wonder does this mean that Adobe is now kind of a ripe acquisition target, because they're highly profitable, they're making money, but revenue of 2.8 billion or 0.8 billion is in one quarter is pocket change for the likes of Microsoft, Google, Apple, and those guys. I always thought in the back of my mind, even when I was working at Adobe, like, one day we're going to get a notice and we're going to be a division of Apple or a division of Google. Craig, what do you think, man? Is that what's going to end up happening?
I hope not. I think Adobe does better independently, but it certainly, right now, I don't see any like Google or Apple maybe, but most of them, that's really not their space, and they're happy just to let Adobe take that over and dominate it. Apple kind of dropped a lot of their photography and video editing. They made it more consumerish.
Yeah.
And I don't think they really want to go after the professional quite as much.
Yeah. Really, you hit it right on the head. It feels like, from the Apple perspective, they're placing bets on devices, iOS, and services like iTunes, where they can generate ongoing revenue like that. I don't know if I know Apple or Adobe rather. No, Apple started kind of as the de facto place for creatives. It was like, if you're not on a Mac, you're not a serious graphic designer,
Right.
or a serious photographer, whatever. That's all gone now, because all Windows is at least as good, and not, if not better in some ways, than Mac OS. I know I'm going to get some mail for that. Than Mac OS on some things. But it's no longer, hey, if you're using Windows, you're not a real creative. Chris, you agree with that? And what do you think about the whole acquisition thing? Are we headed towards acquisition?
I'm with Craig. I don't want to see them get gobbled up.
Yeah.
And I don't see why they would be looking to sell, because they just made 2.8 billion profit.
Yeah.
In fiscal one. So I see a lot of this happening with companies. I know we have a story to talk about later, but the build it to be bought thing, I don't particularly like that angle. And now that we're profitable, now people want to buy us. I would like to see Adobe stay the way it is. I think it's great. And I definitely want to see more competition. But, there's so many of these companies that have such a huge head start. Yeah. It's like, who is going to jump in the ring? And, and make a great product that's competitive, but beat them on price.
Yeah, but we've been saying that. I mean, there's other alternatives out there. If you go on the App Store, there's Affinity, there's on the Lightroom side, there's Capture One. There's all these different companies that are making really, really good software to handle those tasks, but still Adobe sits there. I don't know if it's because, people, like Craig was saying, it's the muscle memory. You're just used to using the tools, and why change in the middle of a race if you don't have to, right? It's cheaper to keep her, right? So,
right.
Yeah. Well, there's also no one that has all the entire suite of products that they have, right? You have to kind of do one off. You can have something to replace Lightroom, you can have something to replace Photoshop, you can have something to replace Premiere, but there's no one company that's providing all of them.
Sure.
Right, and there is some synergy in having those integrated.
Yeah, and because I think for me, because Adobe has that kind of de facto monopoly, for lack of a better word. They're kind of entrenched, and people just think graphics when you see Adobe and the cloud and all that stuff. That just seems like it would make it more of an attractive acquisition target for one of these larger companies. If you care about graphics, but if you wanted to own the graphic space, you get Premiere, you get Photoshop, you get After Effects, you get Illustrator, all these well entrenched software packages. If you just wanted to say, okay, now we're going to add ownership of the graphic design and photography space and video space to some degree to our suite of products, and it's only going to cost me, who knows what the price would be. Seems like, I don't know, unless that's not your target, right? So
right.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing about this revenue is the increase in stock photography. They had, I think, 23% of that revenue was from stock photography.
And was it 23%?
I believe that's what I read.
Wow.
And it's a big increase from what it had been previously. And I know that they've been really aggressive about stock photography and really pushing that lately. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, because, especially considering there's been questions about the stock photography space being viable, period. Right? Like, is stock, remember the whole discussion about iStock photo back in the day? Is microstock going away? Is it, and if Adobe's able to swing in there and, revitalize it. Interesting. This is interesting.
Well, definitely. So what's also interesting is I do have photos on Adobe stock, and it has been doing really well in the past year.
Really? What really well? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, compared to what I used to have it on iStock and Shutterstock and all of Folio, Fotilla, and I would sell maybe 1 or 2 images a month.
Yeah.
And in the past, say 9 months, I've noticed I'm selling maybe 10 a month on Adobe stock.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's incredible.
Okay. That's not bad. That's not
well,
bad.
It's still, I mean, it's doesn't even buy me a cup of coffee, but it is interesting that it's, I've had that increase.
Yeah, but generating enough revenue to buy a cup of coffee multiplied by 2 or 3 million people, that's what they say in internet marketing. The whole saying in internet marketing or digital marketing is, the basic math is a little number times a slightly larger number equals a really big number.
Right.
$2 times 100 people is real money every month.
What do you attribute that to, Craig? What do you think that's from?
I think, partly I think they're integrating it into their tools more now.
Okay.
The latest Photoshop and Illustrator, InDesign all have a little tab you can go directly to Adobe stock and type in a keyword, and it'll pop up a whole bunch of images, and you can actually test them in your document. They've made it very seamless. So instead of having to go download an image and place it and all that, they've integrated into the design layout process.
It's right in the panel over there, right? It's right in the side panel. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on, guys. This other thing that I threw in there, I actually didn't update the notes, but I sent a message to both of you on TWiP Pro. But that's Lytro. Did you guys get that note I put about Lytro in there?
Yeah.
Lytro.
So, Lytro being purchased by Google for, what did it say? 30? Was it 30?
40 million. I believe it's 40 million.
40 million or 30 million?
Yeah. 40.
$40 million. But it sounds like a lot of money, but if you read the article, they took investment capital. I think the last round it said was around $200 or $300 million.
Right.
Ouch. So yeah, the articles were saying like investors' heads were exploding and all that. And just for folks that don't know about what Lytro is. So Lytro is a company that I've interviewed the founders and various people from Lytro, and they created this really cool technology called light field technology that would analyze a scene and basically do what in 3D parlance would be called ray tracing, where you identify where a point of light is and actually figure out the path of light for each photon in that scene, the resulting data means you can go back later and change the focus of the shot that you took, right? So when they launched it, it was revolutionary, and they came out with a little Litro camera that looked like a little, like half of a binocular or something. So they came out with that, and people were like, "Wow, okay," but then that particular product didn't really take off, and they came out with another one that didn't really take off. So it became more of a proof of concept. And I think one of the nails in the coffin, if you want to call it a coffin, was these smartphones that started coming out with their computational photography algorithms built in, where you could take a photo and change the focus point later using a different kind of technology, not necessarily light field, but still as relatively as effective, or at least as effective for consumers. And now you fast forward to now, and their technology is not that remarkable anymore, and there's lots of people using similar technologies on cheaper devices, and they get sold for what, $40 million. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Chris, let's start with you, man, because I saw that. I was a little sad because that was did they just miss the opportunity, a licensing opportunity? Is this good for Litro in terms of now they're going to be part of Google and they could get incorporated into Android, or they're at least going to fizzle as part of the organism that they're now part of?
I do feel a little sad, to be honest. I do think it's really cool technology to be able to take a scene and focus later, but I know a lot of other cameras have like a post-focus type of technology in them. I know some 4/3 cameras do, and so forth. So it's really tough to have investors looking at 200 million down to 25 to 40 million. They're shopping anywhere from 25 to 40. I know that I don't know if it's 100% a closed deal, but man, for such a cool tech to have so much money behind it, and for it to really sound like it's flopping as far as from a valuation standpoint, it is pretty sad, Frederick.
It's sad, right? It's sad. I was like, what? Because that was like, really, okay, is this the future of the cameras, right? I was thinking back in the day when I was interviewing them. When you interview these tech startups, it's the reality distortion field that pops up. It's like, oh, this is Litro technology is going to be in everything.
Right.
They're going to be a gazillion-dollar company because Canon and Nikon and Panasonic and Fuji are going to license their technology, and all of our cameras are going to have post-focus capabilities. And fast forward to today, not so much. Our cameras pretty much do the same thing. They shoot higher resolution video. They're lower light. They perform in lower light better. Everything's better, but it's generally the same as it was back in the day. It's just everything's better. We don't have any brand new technologies in our cameras.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes down to it, as a photographer and someone that really likes photography, just to look at an image and kind of reverse engineer what someone was doing when they made that image, what that image makes me feel, and how it inspires me to do my own on another level. Like, I don't know if I want to do all of that. Sometimes I want to just see a great picture, a great moment, emotion. Sometimes I don't care if it's in focus, if I get something from it, and not all the time do I want to, like, when I see an image, I want to capture the image and have it be done.
Right.
So for me as a creator, like, I don't want to take a picture and be like, oh, let me just focus on that later.
Yeah. Maybe occasionally, right? Maybe like, I'm
occasionally,
sure. Where I'm never going back to again, and this is the perfect shot. I wish my camera had focused on the thing I was focusing on instead of the background, right?
Right.
If you could go back later and fix that would be great. But that's a niche case.
Right.
Right.
I'm in the chat room. Don Komarechka's in there. Hey, Don. Don says Google loves patents, and they have a huge future with VR tech. Google is the company to push this forward with all angles. I agree with that because, you think of where VR is going, especially, if you're a nerd like I am waiting on that movie Ready Player One, right? So there's the future of VR I think is really, really interesting, especially if you fast forward a half a decade or so. And if you look at a company like Google, like Don is saying, you got a company like Google, I got to believe that they have a playing deck or two full of patents, right? And this Lytro patent is just them going, okay, here's the king of spades
Yep.
right there.
Yep.
Right. Well, the article did say that they were planning on using this technology in VR, and that is why Google bought it.
Yeah.
It was just an asset sale. So none of the people from Lycro are going to be moving over to Google, or just a couple people maybe.
Yeah.
It was just selling them the patent and technology.
That's sad for them, because the holy grail for a lot of people in Silicon Valley is to get acquired by Google, get some Google stock, go buy your nice 20,000 square foot place somewhere in Palo Alto and live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Or in this case, 40 million divided by how many, I don't know what their math looks like, but you get hopefully the employees get a chunk of that. They may still be able to do that. Who knows? But 40 million in Silicon Valley, that's what, in some neighborhoods, that's 2 or 3 houses, right? Well. All right. So this last thing in the news I want to talk about before we get to our feature segment, which is about Rockstar Trainers of Photography. Chris, you posted a lot of cool stuff in TWiP Pro as we were preparing for the show. I want to have you go through it. You were talking about the Samsung Galaxy S9, Sony, and then some issues with Fuji's QA. You want to take us through that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a nerd. I'm a tech nerd. And so I'm an Apple guy, but when something new and different comes out, I got to touch it. I got to know about it. Mm-hmm. So the Galaxy S9 Plus has a low light mode that automatically selects 1.5 for the f-stop or 2.4 for the f-stop, depending on how much light it has. So it has a variable aperture for their camera. So in addition to, the Plus version having 2 lenses, one of the lenses has a variable aperture on it, and it's pretty cool. And that's what's interesting to me is how this may or may not trigger other camera companies to do the same, because these are profit machines. So and when I read somewhere that this camera is the 3rd most expensive component in the phone, and I'm not sure how many phone companies want to make the optics that expensive. But I'm curious to know how this may affect manufacturers and also the end user. Like, is the end user that is sold on having DSLR quality in their pocket going to even use it or understand it, or will it just kind of just be a thing,
another
because
feature that you never use, like
use
90% of Microsoft Word or Photoshop or something, right? Yeah.
Right. So pretty interesting stuff, along with their version of Animoji and a few other things they have going on. This camera is pretty interesting. I want to try it out for sure.
Wait, aren't you? I thought you had an iPhone 10. Did you get rid of that?
Never.
He says in his James Earl Jones voice, never.
Never.
Love it. Cool. All right. So what's next? So the next thing, just to hit on quickly, is Sony and the fact that they're crushing it. I put in the notes that Sony equals the Mecha Godzilla in the photo industry, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's really challenging because I'm booking a lot of jobs that are hybrid types of creative jobs, drone / video / stills. We want this, we want that, we want close-ups, we want this. Like, I'm doing this large fair and I have anyone from Ludacris to REO Speedwagon that I have to film, and I have to have a reliable camera. And I'm looking at, anything from Micro Four Thirds up to this new A7 III. And I'm thinking $2,000. $2,000 is a lot of money. That's a lot of market. So what do I do? And as much as I can't stand the ergonomics of that camera, I was at WPPI and I had them back and forth. I had a friend of mine had a copy of it for press, and I was going back and forth with it. And I had an XH1 for 3 days straight. And I just couldn't pick up the Sony. I love the Fuji, but for what it does, and it's $2,000, there isn't a lot that sounds like value to me.
Right. And aren't we getting there? That's one of the things I want to talk about when we move into the feature segment about training is, and you highlighted this a little bit when we were chatting back and forth in TWiP Pro, I think, but the idea of where do you want to place your money, right? No one's got infinite funds these days, but some people do, but most of us don't have infinite funds. So $2,000 is a lot of money. And if you're buying incremental features in a camera system because of glitzy marketing and all that, it's one thing to just get it because you want it. You're just that person, I got to have the best of the best all the time. But if it doesn't really push your art forward, does it make sense? And then secondly, could you do something else with that $2,000, like improve your photography in some other way other than putting it in your camera system, like workshops or online training or software, like Skyloom from Kevin LaRue over there, right? Kevin, you got to tell us the pronunciation of your company. Is it Skyloom or Skylum? I don't know. I need to know. All right, well, let's move on. So that's Sony. Okay, Fuji. So I've never owned a Fuji. I've never owned a Sony camera, but I've got a chance to play with lots of them. I've never really shot with a Fuji camera, though I hear like Fuji's legions are like World War Z zombies. It's just like, people get in that. Like Valerie Jardin, who's going to be on the show, I think next week. Valerie is in the Fuji world, and you will pride that Fuji will be in her casket if she ever passes away, right?
Yeah.
But they're having some QA issues, is what I hear. What do you say about that?
Yeah, when I had an X Pro 1, I had an X T1, and I had zero issues whatsoever. My X Pro 2, unfortunately, a handful of issues. There were some firmware updates, but the XH1, I'm hearing kind of a range of things. And so I'm hearing anything from shutter buttons popping out, to lockups, having to pull the battery out to reset it. I'm hearing certain modes and, either continuous high or low, the camera freezes, or there's humming sounds, or, some of it could be, just the way the camera is. Mm-hmm. Some of it could be memory card issues, incompatibility issues. I think from an engineering standpoint, it's probably a nightmare to try and diagnose these things. Yeah. But it does give me pause because I'm in the mind of, okay, I have a job to do now. Like, I love photography and it's a hobby, but some of my clients are paying thousands of dollars for me to capture moments that I won't be able to say, wait a minute, hold on a second. Like, can you do that one verse one more time? Can you guys jump up and down real quick one more time? Like, or if a memory card, corrupts, or I don't have 2 slots or whatever, like I have to have something reliable. And so it keeps me going back and forth, and it kind of gives me pause on buying a brand new camera, period, because there's always growing pains. And, unfortunately there's a few going on right now. Hopefully they get fixed because I really do want to buy the Fuji, but I'm going to buy the tool that makes sense for the job that I have to perform.
I'm going
to keep old faithful.
I'm going to suggest, I may be a little biased, but, Micro Four Thirds, Panasonic, Lumix is what I shoot with. And in fact, you're looking at video from a GH4 right now. So this is a GH4. Let me switch the camera to me so you can see it. So this is a GH4 with a f1.7 15 millimeter lens on it that's plugged into my Mac. That's what I'm using.
Nice.
Yeah. So you, you can
and stuff like anything that can make you look good. That's
All right,
that's a good selling point right there.
I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to take the bait. I'll let you continue the show with your dignity, Craig Colvin.
Yeah.
All right, I want to remind the chat room and the people that are watching this, if you're in the chat, please post your questions because we'll be getting to the Q&A segment in a couple minutes here after the feature discussion. So let's move into that, guys. So the Rockstar Trainers of Photography. Let me read the little blurb that I toiled over and wrote for this. All right, here we go. So photography is one of the world's fastest growing hobbies and professions. And along with that goes a vibrant education and training industry. But who are the best of the best? And where should photographers go to find them? In this episode, Craig Colvin and Christopher Berry join to discuss their favorite Rockstar Trainers of Photography and the resources on and offline to help you get focused on learning to get better results with your photography. So let's dive into that. Chris Berry, I want to start with you, man. So we started with a little bit of the discussion on it. Yeah, you got $2,000 burning your pocket. Should you upgrade your camera to get better low light or some other whiz bang feature? Or would it be wiser to throw it into something like Lynda Com or Kelby training or masterclass, et cetera? What do you think?
I think education and experience is what's going to really be a great foundation for most people. I really have, there are a lot of photographers that I really appreciate for the different ways that they get to their destination. And then when they get there, they pivot and push the next level. But I like hackers and experimenters. I like people who are consistent. I like really sharp work. And one of the photographers that I've been following for a while, his name is Fancher. He is an Ohio-based photographer, commercial photographer out there. He's done some writing for, I want to say it's either F-Stoppers or SLR Lounge or one of those, maybe even Petapixel. I'm not exactly sure. But he does incredible work. And I have a couple of his books. They're called Studio Anywhere, and they're great tools for one, kind of putting you in the mindset of, hey, what is your kit? What can you do with it? Work it, do it. You have a small speed light, here's what you can do. You don't have any modifiers, here's how you make small light big. You have a 20D, you have a 50D, you have a 5D2, you don't have high speed sync, well, get some filters and do this. If you don't have a radio trigger, get a sync cable. So it's very much so, it eliminates the myriad of excuses that we could all give ourselves when we look at photography in social media. I can't make that picture because I don't have, this huge light. Well, what you do have is an environment with this type of scenario you can create. So take your kit that you saved up money for and go make it happen. And here are a few ways to do it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like there's an industry, and it's hard to articulate this, but there's because I'm in marketing, right, and I understand how all this stuff works, and it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, we want these camera manufacturers, the Panasonics, the Sonys, the Fujis, the Canons, and et cetera, all these guys, we want them to continue to innovate and create these and keep pushing it forward and keep giving us the next best thing. But at the same time, the photographers themselves have to make the decision: should I go with that next camera, or should I do something else with that money? Should I put it into just glass and buy lenses, which are forever, or should I buy training or whatever? Craig Colvin, I want to throw it to you, man. So what do you say about this?
I agree with Christopher that education is always going to be better than better equipment. Right? If you know what you're doing, you can take good pictures with any camera, and it's learning that is what's going to be important. And a lot of it is experience. You have to not only do the learning, but actually go apply that knowledge. I think that's one of the biggest challenges I had early on. I would spend all my time learning, but I wasn't taking photographs. Right. And so as soon as I got out there and started applying what I was learning, that's when, my photography really took off. Yeah,
it's interesting. So I want to, Chris, I know you guys put all your picks in the show notes, the Google Doc for the show notes. I want to start with you, Craig, since you're going. So photographers you admire, you got an awesome list in here. And by the way, folks that are watching this, all of the links and photographers that we mentioned will be in the show notes for this show on thisweekinphoto.com, as well as in the description in the YouTube blog or the YouTube post. So they'll be in both places. But Craig, why don't you tell us let's start with the photographers that you admire.
All right. Well, first one is John Paul Camponegro. He's mainly a landscape photographer and does some manipulation and compositing in Photoshop, which is not really what I do, but he taught me more about photography than anyone I've ever taken a workshop with. He changed my entire way of thinking about photography. He does a lot of use language and words and music to get creative. And his courses are more about creativity than actually taking the photograph.
And are his courses online? Are they online courses or
No,
workshops?
it's all in person. His are, and he travels all over. He has them. He lives in Maine. He teaches them there in his home. He also works with Seth Resnick, and they do one in Florida. But he also travels all over: Iceland, Antarctica, Patagonia, and does his classes all over the world. But it, as I said, it completely changed my entire perspective on photography, and really made me, level up, basically.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. So it changed your perspective on photography, made you level up. Do you think you would have that same perspective shift in leveling up if you got the next camera up from the one that you own right now?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, with the next camera up, it's right now it's more about, maybe better low light, faster focusing, more megapixels, but that doesn't, in general, that's not going to make me a better photographer.
Yeah.
Right. That's just, it's a tool, and it's a better tool where I can now maybe take photos in situations I couldn't as well in the past. It's just making the job easier.
Yeah.
But it's not making me a better photographer.
All right, Craig, run through the rest of the photographers
All
you
right,
admire
so real
quick
quickly, Keith Carter, he's a fine art photographer in Texas, and he teaches workshops all over. He has Arizona workshops. He teaches with them quite often. Fine art photographer, he is very much about taking a imperfect photo. Don't try to make it perfect. It's the flaws that make it interesting. So awesome. Very interesting. Renee Robin, which we all know here on TWiP.
She's a friend of TWiP and TWiP Pro. Yep.
Right. And I love her composites. She's very good instructor and teaching how to do her composites. And I learn a lot from her every time I watch. She has both online courses and I've seen her in person.
Fantastic.
Chris Orwig. Chris is he does portraiture, but what I really get from Chris is he's all about inspiration and creativity.
Yeah. And
that's so hard to find somebody that is really teaching that these days. So I always come away inspired anytime I hear Chris talk.
And a little anecdote about Chris Orwig is that what was it, year before last or actually beginning of last year, when remember Brooks Institute
right.
shut down.
Chris, he was an instructor there.
Chris was an instructor while I was the vice chairman of the board down there. So we got a chance to hang out and talk a lot. Chris left, and it was a whole thing. But I agree with you.
He's a really nice guy.
He's the real deal. There are photographers, and then there are photographers. Lowercase p and capital P, and he's definitely a capital P, probably with an exclamation point on the end. So
right. And finally, this is a photographer I admire, Erwin Olaf. He's a Dutch photographer. He does conceptual narrative type photos along the lines of Gregory Crutzen. And I have not taken a workshop with him. I am taking one in 2 months with him.
Cool.
So I don't know how he will be as a workshop host, but he's kind of he's been making a living doing photography for 50 years.
Craig, what is your mindset when it comes to workshops? Because I know we have lunch from time to time and kind of catch up. And you are either coming from a workshop normally, like I was just at a workshop last week, or getting ready to go to one. That's part of the reason why we picked this topic, right? So you are addicted to workshops, but
I'm addicted to education. So
yes,
I spend 30 minutes every day on photography education. So at the end of the day, I sit down and maybe watching a Creative Live video. It might be reading, photography magazine, might be reading a photography book, but I'm going to do 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
The workshops are more for inspiration. there are two reasons people go on workshops. One is to get educated. Other is for access. And I would say about 20% of my workshops I take these days are access. They're getting me to locations that I might not otherwise go. I do model photography. They're going to have lots of models where if I went, I would just have one model.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of workshops that way. Utah Adventures. I'm doing one in Iceland coming up in June, where it's 6 models and 12 photographers.
And you're teaching as well, though, too, right?
I teach as well. So
workshops.
I teach at the Utah Adventure workshops as well.
Okay.
But most of the ones I'm going to are to get inspired. Yeah. So I'm looking for someone. I don't go to photographers that teach the same genre that I shoot. I go to some, they're doing completely different things. They may be doing landscapes or portraiture or composites, but I go to push myself and expand my boundaries.
Yeah, and taking yourself out of your comfort zone, even if you're just going on a random trip to the next city next to yours, it kind of kickstarts those creative juices a little bit, right? And if you go by yourself, that's one thing, but if you go to a strange city and you're with a bunch of strangers, and they all have cameras and they're all excited, and you have some sort of lattice work of a structure of a plan, then it kind of kickstarts you even further, right?
Right. And so it's the other people. When you go to a workshop or a conference, you're surrounded by people that have the same passion you do, and you can learn from every single one of them. Yeah. Right. And I love that, just marinating in photography for 3 or 4 days or a week with all these other like-minded people.
Yeah, no, I love it. Chris Berry, what about you, man? Photographers you admire? What are some of the folks out there?
Man, that's a good one. I really, and for different reasons, I really like Sue Bryce. I think the time that I really began to appreciate her her skill is her duplicating one of her fashion portrait sessions on stage at WPPI, like 3 WPPIs ago.
Yeah, soup to nuts, right? Yep.
Wow. I mean, it was like, she had a relationship with her subject. She knew the cues, the subject knew, she knew the body, she knew the lighting. She got the image. She had it in camera. She had it essentially close to what she would deliver, and she had it down. It was a system. So I really appreciate that about her. And of course, her finished product and her education, her Sue Bryce education, how she's developed her own photography and how she markets herself and how she provides education for people. Yep. And I just like her business model, which is something that I aspire to at least go in that direction. Yep. And then Miguel Quiles. Miguel is like a very high-end portrait photographer, and he does a lot of education through Adorama and through his own website. And so I really appreciate, one, his and also Nick's availability. I met him first at WPPI, and I first started talking with him on social media maybe 3.5 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And man, he was just receptive. He shared information. And so beyond, what social media can be, when you, like Craig was saying, when you're in these environments with people, you get access to them, and you get an opportunity to kind of more or less solidify how much you want to be influenced by this person in your photography. And he was someone that made an impression on me before I first met him, after I met him, and since the last few WPPIs, he's been really open, and he comes up behind me and, Chris Berry, what do you So that part I really appreciate. He's an excellent photographer, and he sharpens his business skills over time. And he's kind of old school in the way that he works. You want something, you go get it. You give out business cards, you go talk to people, you call this, creative ways of drumming up business and, new techniques and so forth. So Miguel Quiles, yeah.
Is it me, or is it seems like the industry is sort of shifting a little bit. Maybe it's certain genres, but it feels like it used to be that people were much more guarded with their information, and these so-called rock star photographers, like we named this episode, were a little bit aloof and unapproachable. But over the last couple of years, I'd say 3 years or so, they all seem approachable, like what you described. Chris, that you if you take the time to go to a conference like WPPI or Imaging USA or one of these, and they have the time to talk to you. I have yet to find an instance where somebody gave me the cold shoulder or like, oh, sorry, kid, I don't have time to talk to you. And no, I'm not going to tell you about my stuff. Everything seems approachable these days. Is it just me? Is it just because I'm
It's
cool?
not just you. It's not just you. And it's really cool because it's access, and we all have, for a lot of us, some of us are fortunate enough to buy whatever we want and do whatever we want. So when you come across people who are excited about you, why not engage with them, and why not even learn something? Because I do see some of these photographers, kind of doing a little hint of what maybe some of their peers are doing. And so I think that in that particular space, I see everybody trying to expand within the area of photography that they want to be in, whether it be the business side, whether it be services for for clients, whether it be print, whether it be speaking, whether it be creating content. Like, everyone's excited about whatever part of the business that they're in, and it's a free for all for information. I really like that. Yeah.
Craig, do you feel the same way, or you have a different perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've learned that they don't have to be protective of their techniques or whatever. You just because they share it with you, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to go steal their shot.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of times I've had a lot of these instructors say they learn from teaching. Right. Mm-hmm. For myself, when I do workshops and teach, I learn as much from my students as I'm,
absolutely
imparting to them. Right.
Yep.
So I think it's that give and take, and it just makes people more willing to share.
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you guys, because it's like, I don't know, if you rewind back in the day, people were more protective of their marbles, right? Because that was their livelihood, and I can't tell you my secrets to my look, because if I tell you, then you're going to steal my customers. But now I think, you fast forward to today, 2018. We've got social media, the internet. It's a global economy. And if somebody wants to learn how you did something, they can learn how you did that. It's not like you have a secret book, a dusty book under the bed with all your tips and techniques in it. They can get online, or they can get on their phone and figure out everything they need to know about how you did something. Plus, and then the other side of it, for me at least, like even with like TWiP and podcasting and all the different pieces that it takes to do a show like this, if anyone asks me how to do this, I more than happily tell them every little, in as much excruciating detail as you want to know how I produce these shows. It's not secret for me, because the secret magic is there's only one me. Right. So if I do a show, you can do a show, and your show, if you do everything exactly the same as me, it's still from a programmatic or from a hardware, software configuration standpoint, it's still going to be missing the element of me, which makes it unique. And conversely, I will never be able to do the show that you do, because you make your own show unique. Same with photography. If you tell someone, like Craig, if you tell someone how you do, how you convince models to let you pour paint on them, for example, you can tell them exactly how you do it, exactly the words you use, and how you shot it, and how you post-processed it, but they're still not going to be able to do a Craig Colvin shot. Right.
Yeah, it's unique to each individual. So
it's unique to each person. All right, guys, let's move on. So the other half of the other shoe to drop. Oh, actually, I got to tell you guys what photographers I like. Right. So
good list. Good list.
Dude, you have no idea. I have a whiteboard literally filled to my left with all the photographers that I have either had on TWiP or I'm going to invite on TWiP, and people that I know and don't know but want to know. Like, there's a lot of photographers that I admire. So to condense this down in just a couple minutes, I picked a couple of people that came to mind that I think are fantastic anyway. but they're all fantastic. So one of the persons I want to shine a light on first is my friend Derek Story. So Derek runs a podcast. He's an amazing photographer, for one. He does public speaking and a bunch of other cool things, but he runs a podcast. Probably I don't know, his podcast may have been around before TWiP, but it's called The Digital Story, and you can find him at thedigitalstory.com. Derek has a good way of kind of conveying tips and tricks and information to people, and his photography is fantastic. Plus, he runs workshops and that sort of thing. So Derek is fantastic. The next one on my list was Trey Ratcliff. We all know who Trey is, right? So the father of HDR in a lot of ways is Trey. He runs stuckincustoms.com. Stuck in Customs is doing, Trey is always doing, one of the reasons I put him on the list is Trey is always pushing the envelope, trying stuff, failing, trying stuff, succeeding, trying stuff, blowing it out of the water, but he's not afraid to try new things, whether it be new techniques, new cameras. He's not afraid to say, you know what, Sony, you suck for this particular thing. I'm no longer shooting Sony. Now I'm shooting Hasselblad. He'll do that. And now he'll say, no, I'm not shooting Hasselblad anymore. Sony got their stuff together. I'm back to Sony. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's that guy, you know? So I admire him, and I admire him a lot because I can trust what he says when he recommends something, and he knows how to shoot. So, and plus I like to live vicariously through him because he's always running around the planet, you know, in strange and exciting places taking photos. So Trey's one of them. The other one is David Hobby. So David Hobby runs a site called Strobist.com. And David Hobby made his name. Well, Strobist is an amazingly popular site, for one. David Hobby I believe he started as a newspaper photojournalist type photographer, which made me automatically think he's awesome, right? So, but he does that. But the reason behind Strobist is he kind of put a flag in doing amazing photography with one or two strobes, and you know what you can do with the art of using light to create, you know, or artificial light to create awesome cinematic, or not necessarily cinematic, but editorial type images. And he's one of those people that you know they probably go into a situation and can just create, and everything he does looks amazing. And then the last one on my list is Joe Mcnal. So Joe Mcnal, I would definitely check out his blog. First of all, his blog is fantastic and it's beautifully designed. In fact, I want to do a blog like Joe's, but he's at joemcnally.com, and his blog is at blog.joemcnally.com. I put Joe on the list because he's another one of those people that just is a photographer with a capital P, right? He knows this stuff. He knows stuff like the back of his hand, commercial photography. And I put him on the list because Joe spent a lot of my money back in the day when I was shooting Nikon. And I remember getting on this tangent. I watched a bunch of his tutorials, and he was like, oh yeah, using Nikon's TTL system, you could put all these SB 800s at the time in one scene and trigger them all from one, or trigger them from the camera, and you know, he's lighting aircraft with strobes and that kind of stuff. And I was like, I gotta do that. so I ended up with a bunch of strobes and a bunch of clamps to put them on stuff. Never really got into that strobe photography thing, but I learned so much from Joe. I've interviewed him on TWiP. So if you go to thisweekinphoto.com and search for Joe Mcnal, you'll see the interview I did with him. But he's a fantastic photographer. But look, guys, let's switch to sites, right? So the instructors that we admire is only one half of the equation. The other half of the equation are the different sites that you can go to online. And there's offline resources as well. So Craig, let's start with you, man. So sites and offline resources.
Okay, my favorite one's Creative Live. I'm constantly watching the free ones, and ended up buying every single one I end up watching. So they do all sorts of photography related, not just photography, but also some related stuff. You can do Photoshop and inspiration, creativity, some really great, really high quality learning on Creative Live. And everything they do, they will stream live. And if you're around, you can watch it during the day, watch it live, or then you can purchase it for offline viewing. So I use them a lot.
Love it.
Flurn.com, Aaron Nace, he started many
Flern, and make
years
sure you
ago.
get that out there. Flern, and that's PHLEARN. Flern.
.com,
Yep.
right. Really amazing photographer and Photoshop. He is a master of Photoshop, and every time I watch one of his tutorials, I pick up some new tip in Photoshop I'm pretty good with Photoshop, I feel like, but I always learn something new from him. The framednetwork.com. They have a series. They tend to do these series of where they follow a given photographer. They'll have a segment with a photographer where they go and watch them shoot, and you get the behind the scenes and watch them from start to finish create their photographs. I always learn something from that. They also have some competitions. They have one where they Lindsay Adler and Brooke Shaden both go to the same place and have the same concept that they're supposed to shoot, and you get to watch both of them work and see what resulting image they come up with.
I love that. I love that. Both of whom have been on TWiP, so search for their name on thisweekinphoto.com. Hey, shameless plug, man. Come on. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. And then I have one that's not it's a offline, and that is Palm Springs Photo Festival. If you're going to one work conference or whatever a year, that's the one to go to. They have big name people that often only teach one time a year, and that's at Palm Springs Photo Festival. They have just great evening programs, and it is probably the most inspiring conference I go to every year.
Yeah, and you get to hang out in Palm Springs. Like, what
right? Well, yeah. What's not to like?
Palm Springs Photo Festival. Cool, awesome, perfect. Those are great tips. Or great sites. Chris Berry, man, what about you? What are your recommendations?
Oh man, this little site called thisweekinphoto.com.
Boom, boom. I've heard of it.
And it's a lot because you can. Because I do a lot. I'm at home. I'm in my car. I'm at a cafe. I'm in a car and a plane, whatever. And I need different types of ways of consuming information. So sometimes I might play and watch a video, depending on the TWiP show that it is, because there might be sample images or it might be a critique or whatever. But sometimes I can just listen to it and I can get a lot of information from just kind of passive information audibly. And then the other piece that I really like are just photography communities, just local photography communities that may have a presence online, but kind of extend, into, regular meetups or, events, quarterly or photo walks. MagMod is our headquarters. So sometimes, we'll have, a MagMod ambassador come and, do walks with us and so on, or Lightroom groups and things like that. And beyond the photography element itself, there are people that have things going on in their lives. And like Craig was saying earlier, TWiP helped him get out of a rut. These types of things help you get out of ruts. So I definitely like, and then books. Books are huge. I mean,
what are those? I've heard of those.
Yeah, what are those? What are those? But I keep, these are kind of tattered, but these are a couple of Nick's books that I keep because every once in a while I want to read, the intro and remember that it's not always about the gear. Yeah. And then I have books that kind of will help me break patterns and give me photo assignments. And there's a thick photography book that I have where it's, look for certain letters, do this or do that. So those are my online and my offline picks.
I love it. Those are really great. Let me find my list here. Okay, so the sites that I would recommend are, and I think I mentioned this last week on the show, there's a site that I love called masterclass.com.
Oh yeah.
I can't talk enough about Masterclass because they from both the photographer standpoint. I mean, first of all, Masterclass isn't only about photographer. There's a couple photographers on there, like Annie Leibovitz. If you want to learn photography from Annie Leibovitz, you can go to Masterclass and learn it, and the prices are completely reasonable. But I love the fact that there are different things that you can learn there. Like you can learn, from James Patterson one of the, I think, if not the world's best-selling, one of the world's best-selling authors, what his process is. And it's not from the standard talking head in front of the camera. Okay, now let's switch to the screen share type learning, which is fine, but we've seen that a million times. These are high-level productions where they're sitting with a camera crew on James Patterson in a bar in New York City that they emptied out to have a conversation with James Patterson like he's your grandfather or uncle telling you how he, ruled the world of book publishing, right? So
it's incredible.
Yeah, and they've got Usher in there teaching you how to. They've got famous comedians in there. It goes on and on.
I bought a whole bunch that have nothing to do with photography. Steve Martin, Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese. Right.
You're right.
Right. And they're wonderful.
Yeah, and I look at them from because I run the TWiP school. I look at them from that's the benchmark. All right. Yeah. You could look at Lynda. Lynda.com is great, and they've built that sort of metaphor of, hello, students, I'm going to teach you what I'm going to teach you. And then I'll teach you now the screen share, and then back to them on camera. This is what I taught you, right? So that's perfectly fine. And I've learned volumes that way, but it's refreshing to sit down and go through a training session with one of these famous people that are teaching you how to do what they did, right? Like Usher on stage teaching you how not to be nervous in front of a million people. It's like, where can you get that? This stuff was not accessible and not possible just a couple of years ago. Now you can tap into these, and they're adding new courses all the time. So I love that. So definitely recommend Masterclass. The other one that I want to go over is obviously TWiP School, right? So head over to the TWiP School. That's a shameless plug I had to put in there. But the two other ones I want to talk about are Lynda.com. So Lynda.com is Lynda.com got acquired by LinkedIn a couple of years ago. But my expectation was they were going to get diluted into the behemoth that is LinkedIn. They didn't. So Lynda.com is still awesome. They're still adding courses. They're still signing new instructors. And if you need to learn something quick, like Photoshop or Lightroom or Capture One or on and on and on, you go to Lynda and you can sit down with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and learn, right? And come out of the other end pretty much knowing how to use that piece of software. And it goes for almost everything, like Microsoft Word or Excel or on and
really,
on.
really in depth. They go deep with all these too. So
they
you're going to get
definitely
a good.
Yeah, they go deep, and they segment the courses out into bite-sized pieces. So you're not making a commitment of, okay, I want to go through this segment, but I got to sit here for an hour and a half while they go through it. Right. You're going to sit there for maybe 5 to 10 minutes while they go over one little segment. Plus, there's an app for iOS and Android where you can continue where you left off in the car. You're listening to an instructor on the computer. In my case, on an Apple TV in the living room, I'm watching, awesome. Now I got to go jump in the car. I can continue on the app and listen while I'm driving. I'm not watching, but I can listen while I'm driving by Braille, right? But yeah, it is really cool. Lynda.com is one of them. And then the last one is Friend of TWiP. And a really good friend of mine, Photo Joseph. He runs a site called photoapps.expert. And really interesting business model. Joseph gives a metric ton away for free. He's always live streaming. He's in Slovenia right now with his wife and kids, so he's not live streaming today, but usually he live streams a couple times a week and teaches you something new, whether it be about hardware or software. But then he does long form trainings on the website and puts up a snippet of it for free. Then you can purchase the whole thing. And it's really well done. So Joseph and I used to work together at Apple, and I think both of us still have a little bit of that DNA in us. Joseph probably more than me, because everything he does is very, very meticulous and very polished and, very well done. So definitely check out photoapps.expert. And again, all these links that we're mentioning will be in the description for this video on YouTube and also on thisweekinphoto.com for episode 511. All right. Geez, guys, we're making progress. All right, let's move on to the pick of the week segment. This is the segment where, and my mouse is acting crazy, This is the segment where you guys get to recommend something. It could be anything as long as it's related to photography. It could be a technique, could be a site, could be a piece of hardware, software, whatever, as long as it is somehow related to photography. All right. Who wants to go first? Chris, I'm going to put you on the hot seat, man. What's your pick of the week?
Let's do it. Okay, so my pick of the week is this guy right here.
Is that a Litro camera?
No, you know, these aren't worth a quarter of what they were. They were worth a day or two ago. No. But this is the Flashpoint Evolve or AD200 or even Neewer makes this this strobe. It is a higher powered, more or less a speed light, but it does high speed sync. It's got rechargeable battery. It works off of Godox frequencies. It's really, really awesome. And I want to say it's $350 or so. One of them's a loaner and one of them I got used, but this is an awesome higher power portable light. It's got a quarter on each side, one on the bottom. So I got it mounted to a little Pixie if I want to light a background.
Nice.
I usually put it in like a speed ring, slide it right in there. I got it on. I have a little Octabox. It's light. It's powerful. It's got the rechargeable battery. I love it. These are awesome.
I love it. When you hold it like that, it looks like Thor's hammer. Which got destroyed in the last movie, but you know.
Hey,
Yeah, and then you can also you can take the regular flash head off. You can put a bare bulb on there. You can, if you're a Magmod person, you can use Magmod on here. The grips do fit on there. So anyway, these are awesome.
That's really cool. Perfect pick of the week. We'll make sure that's linked to in the show notes. And make sure you put that link. I'm looking in the picks of the week right now, and I'll see that in the show notes. So make sure you give us
cool.
that
I'll
link.
toss it in there.
Yeah. All right, Craig Colvin, man. What about you? What's your pick of the week?
Well, mine is going to be what I mentioned earlier, the Palm Springs Photo Festival.
Yeah.
If it's coming up, I believe it's end of April, and even if you don't take one of the workshops with one of the instructors, just going there for the evening talks is well worth it. Very inspiring. I always come away from that just recharged and inspired, and just hanging around with all these other like-minded people.
Yep. No, it's good. I like the Palm Springs. I actually had a chance to speak there one year, and it was great. You're right. It's a different kind of festival. It's a different kind of workshop, and it's a different kind of energy in the air. It's more like it's like a continuous mixer almost, where you get you're hobnobbing with the instructors and the different people, and you're going out on shoots, and it's not just sit in a classroom, learn stuff, go out to a bunch of booths and buy something, go back into another class. It's much more than that. So I think the founders of that festival have really hit on something that's a little bit magical and different than other workshops and conferences out there. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So Mark Harris in the chat room just said it's in May this year.
Oh, it's in May? Okay.
Yes.
Very cool. Thank you for that. All right. My pick of the week. This has been a self-serving episode for me. But this is important. So my pick of the week, we just so the TWiP Pro community recently launched, and we've been recording these TWiP Pro photo critiques from the folks that submit images into the our photo critique channel within there. It's a Slack-driven community. So TWiP Pro is a private Slack group that you can get to at TWiP Pro, TWiPPRO.com. That's where it is if you want to join it. But the photo critiques are free. So they're on YouTube, and you can view what we say. So I sit down with a different photographer generally every week, and we take the latest batch of submissions to that particular channel, and we do a review just like this. We do a review. We talk to some of the pluses, the minuses of those images, how the photographer can improve, where they hit it out of the park, all that kind of stuff. And we do that for about 45 minutes to an hour for each session. I think the last one we recorded was episode 9. So they're all located in a YouTube playlist that I will link to in the description again for this episode, as well as from the blog post. But I would love it for you guys to head over there and check it out. It's It's fun to do the critiques. In a lot of ways, it's I would say normally it's very humbling to do those because there's some really amazing work that gets submitted from the members. And, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm not worthy to be talking about them because these guys know what they're doing and they're out there. The TWiP Pro community was designed to be a space where it's real photographers interacting with other real photographers and not lurkers and no trolls and no sales and none of that crazy stuff going on in there. It's all just a group of people, like a party of photographers that think and act like you, kind of like a virtual Palm Springs Photo Festival in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So definitely check that out, and I will. I'll link over to that. All right, folks, it's time to dive into our chat or our listener Q&A. You guys ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We've
some good
got
questions in there.
Chris, I saw you in there posting some of the questions. I've been copying and pasting some of them. So if I miss some, please help me fill in the blanks here.
You got it.
First of all, Kevin LaRue has corrected me on how to pronounce the name of his company. It's Sky Loom, like Loom, Loom, but the domain is Skylum, SKYLUM, I believe, .com. And they make amazing software for HDR and photo processing, and they're coming out with some really cool stuff in the future. So head over to their website to check it out. But skylum.com is how you pronounce it. Kevin also has a question. He says, can you comment on whether online versus offline photo education is best? Online versus offline. Craig Colvin, what do you think?
Which is best? They both have their place. I think they're both important. As I said, I do 30 minutes of education every single night, and for that, I of course use the online stuff. Online, I think, is better for learning things, especially tools like Photoshop or Lightroom.
Yep.
Whereas the in-person workshops are probably better for actually, shooting and learning, composition, how to work with models, lighting, that sort of thing.
Yep.
But I do both. I love both.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it depends. It's different modalities of learning, right? Some people learn best by being solo and sitting in their home office, like me, and consuming video, and then going out and trying things and then coming back to figure out how to fix what they do wrong.
Well, that's the trick with all these workshops, online or offline. You have to go implement and practice with whatever it is you learned.
Yeah.
Right. And I used to go to like Photoshop World, and I would sit through, 30 sessions over 4 days, and I would just be saturated. I would come home and retain 1% of it.
Yeah.
And I learned that what I need to do after every single class is I do an action item. I write in my notebook an action item that I need to do when I get home.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that has helped me tremendously, right? Because it forces me to then go implement and try what I've just learned.
Yeah. And that's a good point. But the other side of it is, like I was saying, the modalities of learning are, how it fits into this conversation are, okay, you may learn you may learn better solo and then trying things on your own. You may learn better in a group environment or a classroom environment where you sit down and you can be anonymous and there's a live human up there that you can ask questions to and bouncing back, or virtually like a Creative Live where you can sit in there and it's a hybrid of the two, where if you participate live, you can maybe get your question answered through chat, but then you can sit there passively in your pajamas and watch the presentation go on at your leisure, right? With a certain amount of anonymity. Chris, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think both are great ways in which you can learn something, but you definitely have to get out and practice something. One thing every week, one thing every day, one big action item. I think that's an incredible suggestion for everybody, myself included. I do think that because I can be kind of moody, sometimes I want to continue to learn, but I maybe don't want to be around a bunch of eyes. I don't want to be judged at the moment. I just want to be free to practice whatever I have learned in an environment that I feel safe enough to explore that. And then sometimes I want to go out and I want to see just how awesome other people are and be inspired and brighten their shine in those types of environments.
Yep.
And also maybe I need that inspiration. Maybe I need to be in a learning environment. So I'll go out and I'll be a part of it. So yeah, I think both are incredible, but they have to be actionable,
Yeah.
or you really just are just consuming.
Yeah, you're just consuming. And the other part of this is these things don't need to be an either or, right? It can be,
Right.
you can use the right tool for the right job, or if you're moody like Chris Berry, you can, one day you may feel like being around people, and the next day you may be a misanthrope and want to be alone, right? So,
Yep, exactly. But I still want to make sure I practice something, whether it be, getting familiar with a new piece of gear, or sketching out shoot ideas, or, working on some element of my business, like my creative team. We have to do a shot list for the upcoming gig we have. So there's something to draw from, something that you can take from what you've been learning and apply it in one setting or another, no matter what, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Good words. All right. The next question is from Kent Olinger. He says, do you believe iMovie 10.1.8 is the best thing going? I have a response to that, but Craig Colvin, do you use iMovie? Do either of you guys use iMovie?
I use Premiere. Yeah,
You're a
I've
Premiere guy.
never used iMovie. I'm a Windows guy, so.
I did not know you were a Windows guy.
Yeah. So I have a Mac, and I pull it out and dust it off occasionally when I need to. But
interesting. Then I have questions for you offline, because I need a Windows machine for some stuff I'm trying to do. That is, the things that aren't available on the Mac. Chris Berry, what about you? iMovie. Do you use iMovie?
I don't use iMovie very much. I've used it for a couple of, literally I'll pull over, make a quick movie, and because someone wants a quick drone video or something, I'll use iMovie. But I don't hack into iMovie too much at all, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think the answer is it the best thing going? Is probably, from this group at least, a no.
A no.
But iMovie is fine. I'm a Final Cut Pro 10 user, so that's how, when I'm cutting videos, it's in Final Cut. But when I'm on iOS, on my phone or my tablet, the iPad, it's iMovie all the way. So
sure.
It depends, but I don't do any long form substantive content on iMovie on an iOS device. It's usually, friends and family doing things. I'll trim the clip or whatever and do some down and dirty editing. But if there was a Final Cut Pro on the iOS device, I'd probably use
for
that.
Sure.
So I think that's the question. But the other side of that is iMovie. I've used iMovie on the Mac before, and it is a fine application. It is like, if you don't need to spend the money to go get a Final Cut Pro or Premiere, if you just want to start, right? So don't let, oh, well, all the people that I know are using Premiere or Final Cut Pro 10 or whatever, so I got to save money and not execute on my vision until I have money to do one of those things. Just use what you have. If you have iMovie, it doesn't matter.
Crush it.
It doesn't matter. Crush it with iMovie, because in the end, no one cares what kind of paintbrush you're using. They care about the art at the end of the line.
True story.
Right? Like what kind of paintbrush did Van Gogh use? No one knows, right?
Right. Who knows? Who cares?
No one knows or cares. All right. Here's another question from Ken. He says, is there a good video editing software that extends the capabilities of iMovie for Mac? I think we answered that. Neither of us are sure. Yeah. None of us. Next question from Don Komarechka. By the way, I'm going to be on Don Komarechka's podcast tomorrow. We're recording tomorrow morning.
Awesome.
Don says, what do you think of the 1 in a million amateurs versus professionals who are taking 1 million images to get that shot? Where do you start from to close the gap and make your work stand out? That's a really good question.
That's excellent.
Yeah. Which of you guys want to tackle this first?
Greg! No.
All right.
Greg, you're a Nazi. Go
I was
for it.
sitting there. I was going, please be Christopher. Please be Christopher.
No, I'll take it.
I can.
Okay.
Where do you close the gap and make your work stand out? I think a lot of that is just repetition. Getting out there and practicing, and every time you get practice, you're going to get better. Critique. You need good quality critique of your images.
Right.
It is almost impossible to get, to level up.
Mm-hmm.
without getting someone else to look at your work and point out the flaws in it.
Yeah. No.
Right.
And then also for me, it is when I come up with a concept and I take a photo, or a series of photos, I'm always going, where can I take this next? What's the, how can I push the boundaries of it? So um, just always asking yourself, what direction can I make this to make it even better?
Yeah. And we've
Yeah.
touched on this in a bunch of TWiP episodes before. And it's the idea of how do you, part of this question, one of the tangents that this question can take is how do you determine and figure out what your personal style is, what your look is? And every time I ask that question, I'm going to ask it to you guys too. So let's see if we can get some more data on this. But the question becomes like, is it copying a pro that you admire, like a Craig Colvin? You have a legion of fans, Craig, and people are like looking at your work and they're like, okay, I want to create like Craig, so I'm gonna recreate some of the images that Craig created just so I can learn to be more like Craig. Is that the right way to go, or do you
I don't
another
know.
direction
Well,
is to
it
keep
is certainly a
shooting?
good way to go.
No, go
Um,
ahead.
it is copying others' images. You're going to learn from that. Now, I will often copy those images. I never release them or show them anywhere, but I try to recreate other people's images because I learn, how to do that lighting that I
Mm-hmm.
can then apply for my own photos down the road. So I do think it's a good, a valid way to learn.
Yeah, is it like like some people will say that's a fake it till you make it approach, like fake it and copy, copy, copy. The negative
Well,
of that, and I will say that I do the same thing. If I see something and I'm inspired by some ad or some billboard or something, I'll like, you know what, I want to try that, but instead of using that object, I want to use that object, and I want to see if I can do a similar kind of look because I like that look.
right.
But the danger, I think, of doing that, especially if you're modeling well-known, really established styles, is getting too good at what they're doing and then coming off as a copycat.
Right,
So you
right.
don't want to do that.
You have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, at some point you got to
All,
jump out of the nest and put your own spin and your own stank on it, right?
right, right.
Yeah.
And almost all of my shoots, I have reference photos from other photographers, and then I will show the model, and I say we're going to combine, these three photos into one. We're going to take this pose with this background and this lighting, right? So it's a valuable tool, but
Yeah.
yeah, you got to be careful not to,
Not to copy, yeah.
right.
Yeah. Chris Berry, what about you, man? You have any thoughts on that?
You know, the thing that if I look back to when I first started doing photography and spending money on camera gear, which was a deal I made with my wife. I was like, hey, I want to buy a Ducati or I want to get into photography. And she was like, okay, photography, spend all the money you want. And
That's good marketing and good positioning. It's like,
that's how it happened,
Hey, honey, I wanna spend $1.5 million on something that depreciates, or I want to learn how to do something.
Yeah, keep me out of trouble. I'm not doing wheelies down the street. So that was how it started. But I didn't know a lot, but I had one friend who was saying, okay, don't do this, but go here and learn some techniques. And it was David Hobby Strobus website.
Mm-hmm.
That was like my first thing. And then
I can hear you guys.
And then it was Stuck in Customs.
Yeah.
So that was like, it was technique and it was inspiration. And then I started meeting all these people,
Yeah.
and then I started really loving what they shot, and their techniques and things like that. And then I went my own way. And so I started shooting mirrorless with the NEX system a while ago after I stopped shooting with Sony.
Yep.
And I shot all JPEG. I didn't do a lot of editing,
Mm-hmm.
but I used phones to edit, and I stuck to that. And now that seems to be what a lot of people are doing. They're shooting this and they're mobile editing and they're using mirrorless and they're finding a new way of doing something. So I'm just trying to put blinders on to some of the things that are hot, and really just hammer through what I think I am as a photographer and produce things that I like first.
Mm-hmm.
And then if people come to me and they want me to reproduce something, that's great, because there are so many different ways to, to kind of explore who you are
Yeah.
and find out who that is in a picture, and have some audience return something back to you.
Yeah.
Along with, if you're making a sellable image, what is technically a good image, color, paper, reproduction, no, all those things, of course. But from an artist standpoint, for me, I just want to make a pleasing image, and and learn, and maybe use certain techniques. So I mean, what I do is I'll make a mood board. This is one of my mood boards. And there are elements in a couple of my mood boards that I want to duplicate. So I'll reverse engineer elements of different photos, like Craig was saying. I like this look, I like this lighting, I like this and that. And I'll look at different lighting diagrams. I know there are apps and things of that sort that help with lighting diagrams. And then I'll pick and choose what I want to create. I do that. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a variant on the whole, okay, look at what inspires you and recreate it and do that. Yeah, that's really good. All right, guys, let's move on. We got a couple more questions to go through. We're running a little bit long, but we'll knock this out in a quick second here. So Ruth Happel, hey Ruth. Ruth has a question. She says, when looking for workshops or online training courses, do you choose based on learning gear or techniques? I've only taken a few, but feel in-person programs provide more depth. Craig Colvin, what do you think?
It depends on what it is. Photoshop, if I'm trying to learn Photoshop, I go for, I guess that's more gear than technique.
Mm-hmm.
And in person, yes, they are much more in depth. I also get, it's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes, and I come away only retaining 5% of what I learned.
Yeah.
But I think for gear and maybe even Photoshop, something online like Lynda Com might be better, because I can do it in bite-sized chunks and process it, as opposed to sitting through 4 hours of it and only getting little pieces of it.
Yeah. Chris Berry, what about you? You have anything to add to Ruth? She's asking, do you choose your online training courses or workshops based on learning gear or techniques?
You know what? It sounds like maybe, you're in the beginning of something, Ruth. I would say whatever feels like the best start, whether it be, online or, in person, or with a friend that you maybe admire their work and they're close, or, whatever the case may be. I would say whatever you latch on to best, and doesn't matter, the particulars, the minutia of, what's this and what's that. Is like, am I learning something? I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to take it all in. I'll toss out what I don't need, and I'll keep what I can apply to whatever direction I'm choosing to go with my photography. That's what I would say.
Love it. Perfect. All right. Last question from Ruth. Ruth says, what do you think of DP review? DP review. Chris, you want to
DP review. I don't go there a terrible amount. I used to go there a lot just to look at images and read reviews, because they break down new camera reviews pretty well. But I can't go into too much detail about it, because I'm either out making images, I'm out running around with my kids or my wife.
Yeah, being a photographer and a human.
No, yeah. So I do like it for the reviews and so forth, and sample images and things of that sort. But anything beyond that, I'm not really sure.
Okay. All right. Looks like I have another one here from Kevin LaRue from Skyloom. All right. So he says, Palm Springs is good. What do you think of Texas School or Santa Fe? So Santa Fe workshops. Craig, have you been to either one of those?
I have. I've done Santa Fe. I haven't heard of Texas School. I'm going to have to actually go check them out.
You might have something to do next weekend then.
Right. Great. Yeah, my budget is already shot for this year.
Yeah.
The Santa Fe are great. I mean, they have some really, really good instructors there. And they have a whole range of courses. Some of them are short, some are long, but very in-depth and well worth the money, I believe.
Cool. All right.
There was one other question from Mark Harris.
Oh, good. Go ahead. Go for it.
So this will be my 6th year taking workshops. They're a combination of assignment and daily critique. What are your thoughts on this kind of learning? And they're exhausting. Because you shoot all day. You typically go out and have food and drinks with your fellow students. And then you got to go back to your room and edit photos all night so you can have something to critique the next morning. But as I said earlier, I think critique is the way you get better. And if you can get a workshop like that, I highly recommend.
Yeah. Love it. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say maybe after 6, maybe peel back on them and spend some money on traveling. I mean, that would be my thing. I mean, that's the mode that I'm in right now is, I want to kind of look at how much gear I'm buying, look how much learning I'm doing, how much money I might be spending, and maybe say, okay, you know what? I have all these acquired skills. I've been in these environments. I'm going to take this amount of time off and I'm going to, apply all of this learning in one spot. And really create some images that I love. I mean, I kind of feel like I've gotten way more information than I really can use. It's almost like buying a new camera. You buy a new camera and it's got all the bells and whistles, and you use it for a year or 18 months, but you only use 50% of what it can. It's like you buy a Ferrari, you only drive it 85 miles an hour.
Right.
You only track day once a year.
Right. Well, then what's the point? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, keep learning, of course, but dip into that 6 years of workshops and like take that money and travel and go do something. That's the mode that I would say go into.
I love it. Wise words to end on. Chris, did I miss any of the questions in there? I think I got most of them.
I think Craig just snagged the last one.
Perfect.
And I think we addressed Kevin's other question about online versus offline photo education. Which one is best? We took care of that.
Yep.
I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Some good questions in the chat.
Really good questions. Really good questions. And folks, I want to remind you, if you want to jump in on the conversation or chat with us in person, you can join us at TWiPPro.com. All these folks that are on the show right now, and most of the TWiP episodes are in there. So I designed it as a place where you can interact with the hosts that show up on the different shows, as well as a gaggle of other really, really talented photographers. So definitely head over there and check it out. If you want to stalk these guys directly, Craig or Chris, where can people go if they want to check out some of the stuff you're working on?
Instagram is my place. It is at Mcman, MIKMAAN. And then on Twitter, it is at Xman, EKSMAAN. And it's also Facebook/Xman to find me.
And if you can't remember any of that, it will be linked in the show notes for this episode, also in the description for the video. Craig Colvin, if people want to see some of that fantastic stuff you do, where should they go?
Instagram, Craig Colvin Photo. Also my website, Craig Colvin Photography, and Facebook, Craig Colvin Photography. All
right, perfect. All right, guys, thank you both for spending time today and doing this. This has been a really good show.
It was a pleasure.
Awesome.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, I want to do a show like this for a long time where we dive into, like, who are your favorite influences? Who are your favorite photographers? How do you learn? What are, the people that are really good out there that are shooting? How do you get that way? I think we covered most of it. So
it was good. Good discussion.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming on. All right, and for the listeners, if you want to subscribe to the audio version for this show, you can subscribe to TWiP at thisweekinphoto.com/subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that bell on the YouTube page right in the upper right somewhere if you want to be notified when we launch new live streams and new videos. All right, and with that, it is time to take that lens cap off. This is TWiP.